You're listening to the I'm Busy Being Awesome podcast with Paula Engebretson, episode number 259. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. How are you? Today, we are talking about decluttering, and more specifically, decluttering your schedule, decluttering your calendar. Now, I was inspired to do this episode because I've actually been on a bit of a decluttering kick over the last couple of months or so of decluttering my stuff. And one of the approaches that I have used throughout this time is a process from somebody named Dana K. White. And let me tell you, her approach is phenomenal. It is so impactful. If you are new to Dana K. White, I will link to some of her stuff in the show notes, but she began, I believe, as a blogger, and she now has a podcast and several books all about decluttering. And it is not the, Pinterest perfect approach to minimalism and stark white shelves with nothing on them. No, she is a real life, down to earth human who knows what it's like to deal with real clutter. In fact, her blog is called A Slob Comes Clean. And if you are looking to start decluttering, or you've done some decluttering approaches before, but you just feel really stuck or overwhelmed, start with Dana K. White. Her stuff is so good. I highly recommend checking out her methods. With that being said, today, we're not talking about decluttering stuff. What I want to do is talk about decluttering our schedules. So I'm going to give you a little bit of context here. The other day, while decluttering, I was listening to one of Dana K. White's books. It's called Organizing for the Rest of Us. I will link to it in the show notes. It's a fantastic, succinct, super actionable book. But in it, she gives this overview of her primary decluttering method, and more specifically, her container concept. And she teaches this container concept in one of my other favorite books of hers called Decluttering at the Speed of Life. Again, I just can't speak highly enough of her work. I really think it is ADHD accessible. She doesn't speak specifically to ADHDers, but she speaks to ADHDers. So I really do think it's approachable. But when I heard her give this summary of her container concept, it reminded me of how applicable it is to not only decluttering stuff in our homes, but also to help us declutter our schedule and our time. Now, many of you have probably heard me talk about thinking in containers of time in the past. I've talked about this a lot. I love the idea of thinking in containers. And today, I actually want to explore this topic a little bit differently through the lens of Dana's decluttering process, because I think it adds this important layer. And in fact, I think it helps us face the often frustrating fact that while we can do anything, we can't do everything. I know, I hate that too, but it's also true. We can do anything, but we can't do everything. As a side note, I think coming to grips with this is so important. Even though we fight against it, I think coming to grips with the fact that we can do anything, but not everything is so key. Because once we genuinely understand this in our bones, once we truly accept this, that's when we find the freedom on the other side. When we genuinely understand that we literally can't fit everything in to our days, when we truly feel that all the way into our bodies, that's when we become more intentional about what we actually want to include in our days, rather than fighting against reality, telling ourselves that we should just be able to fit it in. No, we can't. We can't fit it all in, because we are brilliant idea machines with way too many things that fit in a 24-hour day or 168-hour week. When we truly accept this and we understand that we cannot fit everything in that we want to do all at once, that's when we become so much more intentional about what we are choosing to include in this current season, in this container of time. Not that we can't do it later, but that we can't do it all at once. So, on that light note, Let's dive in to Dana's concept first, okay? So one of Dana, as if we're best friends, Dana, she was just telling me as I listened to her book, she was speaking personally into my ear. Okay, so one of Dana's main approaches to decluttering is all about viewing our space as containers with limited capacity. So instead of asking yourself, well, I don't know, how many socks should I keep or how many towels do I need? What we want to do is use the container to be the decision maker. If your sock drawer doesn't close, you have too many socks. So we need to get rid of as many socks until we get to a point where we can close the sock drawer, right? If the container is overflowing, that means we have too many. If the books don't fit on your bookshelf, the container is full. It's time to declutter until we get to a point where the container fits the books comfortably. Because when we go past the container, there's no more space. So this container concept really revolves around the idea that every space in our home is a container. And each container has a limited capacity. And this concept helps us to understand that the size of the container determines how much we keep. So we start by filling the container with the things that we love the most. We put our favorite socks in first. We put our favorite mugs in first to ensure that we keep them. And then once we get to a point where there is no more room in that container, we've reached capacity. That's it. And then the stuff that doesn't fit, it's time to let it go. Okay? And this principle ensures that we don't try and cram everything in. It helps ensure we're not trying to pile a bunch of stuff in when it doesn't actually fit. It helps ensure that we create an organized and functional space. Now, you know where I'm going with this, right? Don't turn off the episode. Stay with me. It's going to be a hard truth, but I'm telling you it's everything. Now let's think about this and applying this container concept to your time and your schedule. So just like our physical spaces, our days have a limited capacity. We can only fit so much into our schedule without the schedule overflowing and it's spilling out into our other containers and taking up more space than we intended it to. Right? Taking up the space for things like sleep. Oops, it overflowed, but it's going to take up space somewhere else. Sleep, rest, connection with people, getting our work done, whatever the thing is. Right? If we're not mindful of those containers and what actually fits, it's going to overflow and take away from something else. So by thinking about our days as containers, it helps us face the reality of a limited amount of time, while also supporting us in creating a more manageable and realistic approach to keeping a schedule that works for us and for our brains. So this concept is especially powerful, especially for those of us with ADHD, because many of us struggle with intense time blindness, that tricky inability to actually sense how much time has passed or how much time we need to do things. And this often leads to overbooking our schedules and feeling like we're constantly behind and carrying around this never-ending to-do list that never seems to get shorter because we keep adding more things to it. And this can be incredibly frustrating. We can feel incredibly overwhelmed as we're thinking about all of these things and not being able to stay on top of them. But when we start using the container concept, we can start to see our time differently. We can break our days into smaller, more manageable pieces, into morning activities, afternoon activities, evening activities, or separate containers for work stuff and home stuff. Or maybe you start thinking of your days in fifths or quarters, like we talked about back in episode, 243, the 4 quarters method, okay? Thinking in these containers helps us to visualize our limits and make more intentional choices about what we want to include in the time that we have each day. Remember, just because we write something in our schedule doesn't mean that we can magically get it all done. We need to respect the time that each task or each project takes and recognize that our time containers can only hold so much. This shift in perspective, when we can really drop into it, can be a game changer because it has the potential to help us manage our schedule with such greater ease and greater effectiveness and efficiency. So let's talk about these containers. Why do I love the idea of containers so much? Why am I always talking about containers? Essentially, I think that time containers are an effective way to help us really visualize the capacity of our days. So similar to how we have very physical containers for our belongings and things either fit or they don't, right? Just like a shoe rack can only hold so many shoes until it can't hold anymore. Our days can only accommodate a certain amount of activities and tasks. And by thinking through our time in terms of these containers, we can better manage our schedules and set more realistic expectations for what we can accomplish and when we can accomplish it. And doing it without burning out, doing it in a sustainable way. So, what might this look like? Well, you could, like I mentioned, think about your containers of time in kind of 3 daily sections. So for instance, maybe you have a morning container, an afternoon container, and an evening container, and you start to learn how much fits in each one of those. That could be really great if you are a brain who prefers a lower level of structural support. You could also think about containers of time in regard to the context or the type of work you're doing. So these containers could maybe look like the things you do each day and intentionally deciding how much time you want to dedicate to each thing. So work hours, personal time, family time, what have you. Now, I do think some of the most powerful containers to think in are, as I mentioned briefly earlier, the approach we talk about in episode 243 in regard to thinking in either quarters or fifths, right? Dividing up our day according to quarters or fifths. I will link to this episode in the show notes, but as a kind of top line overview, you could divide your day into 4 quarters, right? So you might have 4 containers of morning, midday, afternoon, evening. And I think this method really is powerful in helping you think about what you want to fit in that container and then also giving you a reset, ensuring that if one quarter doesn't go well, you can always start again at the next quarter. You can always start fresh, right? And you can get yourself right back on track. Now, for those of you who might prefer a little bit more structure, like myself, okay, you might find that you prefer a fifths approach. You might find that a little bit more effective for your brain. So this method is where you divide your day into 3-hour blocks. Now, of course, the timing is going to be different for every brain because we all have different preferences on when we are clearest and when we want to work on different types of tasks. But for myself, my fifths approach is early morning, which is about 6 to 9, mid-morning from 9 to 12, afternoon from 12 to 3, late afternoon from 3 to 6, and then evening from 6 to 9, okay? The rest of the time, hopefully, I am getting into sleep and sleeping. But whatever approach you use, thinking about your day in containers of time can be incredibly effective because it allows us the opportunity to intentionally decide what we want to do within each of these containers. If we have 3 hours for our first container, what will fit? What do we want to do with this time? And as an added bonus, these separate containers, as I mentioned, also provide us with multiple chances to kind of reset throughout the day should we need it. They offer this regular rhythm and these clear benchmarks to help our time-blind ADHD brains check in and be aware of that passing time. Plus, these methods can also make prioritization easier because they help us focus on what matters most in each block. Now, if you are multitasking, come back to me. Okay, this is really important what I'm about to say here. It's perhaps one of the most important points of this entire episode. Okay, you with me? Once our containers are full, that is it. Once our container of time is full, that's it. We can't pack more into it. It doesn't matter how hard you try to shove the thing in. It doesn't matter how tiny you write in your time blocking template. Once the calendar is full, once that container is full, it's full. As Dana K. White reminds us, if you're frustrated about this, if you're upset, if you're irritated, I get it. Me too. But blame the container. Sorry, the container just doesn't hold it, right? It is a bummer when we can't do everything that we want from 9 till noon. I hate it too. But that's reality. The container simply can't hold it. Blame the container. Don't blame yourself. Blame the container. This is simply what fits within the container. This is what the container has capacity for. That's not proper English. For which the container has capacity. I am telling you, as we begin to recognize and respect the container's limits, that's when we can start making these incredible shifts in managing our time more effectively and reducing the overwhelm that often comes with trying to do too much and fit everything in when it simply won't fit. It is the equivalent of trying to fit 47 mugs in a space that holds 12. Okay. So now let's talk about visualizing these containers. Okay, let's talk about what it can actually look like. As a heads up, for the sake of time in this episode, I'm going to give kind of the top line view of the strategies. And if you want to take a deep dive into any of the ones that I speak about, you can head to I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com and just search for the term or the strategy in the search bar. You will find blog posts, you will find episodes that go step by step through the different processes, okay? But just for time here, to make sure that we can move through everything, I'm going to keep it brief and just give that top contour of the step-by-step, okay? So first, let's talk about visual tools. To effectively manage our time containers, visualizing them is really key, especially since so many of us struggle with poor working memory, which means it's hard for us to hold the things that we want to be doing in our mind. Okay, so when we have the visual reminders, it helps us literally remember what we're focused on throughout the day or throughout the week. Plus, it helps us better visualize the passage of time because we can see how it's laid out throughout the day and what's happening in each of the containers. So using tools like calendars or planners or digital apps, whatever works best for you, it can help you to see your time more clearly and manage those containers more effectively. Now, whether it's digital or paper, that is a very personal choice. Do whatever works best for you, okay? Both can work great. It really depends, again, on your season of life, on what feels best for your brain, on what allows you to really visualize and see what the things are that you're working on and the passage of time. I actually use a hybrid approach. So I use a digital task management system. I use Todoist so I can quickly jot down all of my projects and ideas wherever I am. So if I'm out walking Bruno or if I'm running errands or whatever, but I just think of something, I can jot it down into Todoist. But then every week and every day, I do planning in my analog paper planner. Because when I use my paper planner, it gets me to really slow down and actually assess the amount of time that I need for each of the different projects and tasks and things. It helps me make time real. And that's what works really well for me. Okay, so when I can combine the digital of the quick capture and just having it wherever I go with the paper to make myself slow down and really think about how much time I need for the different tasks, that's what works for my brain. Also, if you want to check out the specific planner that I use and that I use with my clients, you can check it out through the link in the show notes, or you can go to I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/planning system. So you can get your own copy. I will send you a physical paper planner directly to your door. And then you also get a training where I walk you step by step through using each of the different parts of the planner so you can really shape it to work for your brain. Okay, so again, you can go to the link in the show notes or go to I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/planning planning system. And planning system is all one word. I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/planning system. Oh, I also wanted to mention, I've had a couple of people ask about digital versions of this planner. So I've been thinking about it because I have heard a couple of people ask now, and I wanted to ask all of you, would you be interested in a digital version? That way you could use it on your iPad or your Kindle Scribe or whatever, or for those of you who want to print out specific pages that you like and kind of use it over and over, or if you want to bring it to a place where they can spiral bind it or something, if you don't want the regular binding. Is that something that you would be interested in? If so, if you would like a digital option, would you let me know? You can either pop over to Instagram and send me a DM. I am at I'mBusyBeingAwesome, or you can send me an email, Paula@I'mBusyBeingAwesome. If there is enough interest, I can absolutely make a digital option available too. So let me know. Okay. So again, the top line contour here is to make your containers and the tasks that you have within those containers visible. Whether you use digital or paper or a combination of both, totally up to you. And depending on your season of life and what's going on, your current interests, what your brain is focused on, you may switch it up. That's okay. Okay. All of that is beautiful. What I encourage you to do is make an intentional choice for this season of what you're going to use. So for this month, for this literal season, throughout the summer or something, right? Choose the larger container of time that you're going to practice using this approach, whether it's a paper or an analog or a combination, and stick to that for that container of time. And then you can switch it up. Okay. So choose your approach and then dive in for a longer container of time, a month, a quarter, what have you. Okay. So once you have your visual tools in place, now the next step is to prioritize your tasks and put them in these containers. And again, I have several different episodes on prioritization and how to prioritize for all of my clients. Be sure to check out the trainings within the client portal, all about your big picture priorities and your daily prioritization. Okay, that's where you'll find your step-by-step approaches. But as a quick overview, here's how we do it. First, we want to start by identifying the most important and necessary tasks on your list. Okay, these are going to be the tasks that have the biggest impact on your goals or the biggest impact on your responsibilities. We want to put those tasks in your containers first. And again, to determine what is most important, you might consider the urgency, the importance, and the impact of the tasks. Okay. Generally, we want to prioritize the ones that are urgent and impactful and important first. Again, you can dive into more strategies and things, but for today, use the approach that works the best for you, that helps you identify the order of operations for your brain that honors your goals, your current situation, and your current capacity. Okay, so we have identified what our containers are. We've made them visible. We know the priorities. Now we want to estimate time for these priorities. I know this is super challenging, but it's also really important for us to start learning how long different tasks take, especially the ones that we tend to do often. Okay. So we want to be realistic as possible about how long these different priorities are going to take within our containers of time. As I've mentioned several times before, with deep reluctance, whenever I start something new that I've never done before, I tend to triple the amount of time that I think I need when I'm scheduling it out. I know it's so when I think about it, but it's usually pretty accurate. Okay. I am so time blind that generally, if I've never done it before and my brain goes, it'll probably take 30 minutes. Nope. It's usually about an hour and a half. Okay. So it's really important to allow yourself the time that you'll need. Because if we are planning within these containers of time, but we're not accurate about that time estimate, the containers don't work. Then we're overflowing our containers. Okay. Now, if it's something that I have done before, like I said, if I've never done it before, usually I triple the time I think I need. If it's something I've done before, but I haven't really gathered the data, I just kind of think, no, I think it usually takes me about X amount of time. Then I double it. It's only after I have gathered the data, a couple of times to really know, so it's not just a one-off when I happen to be in hyperfocus mode and can produce really quickly. It was a more general amount of data over several days that I go, okay, nope, this usually takes me 45 minutes, or this generally takes me an hour to write X amount of social media posts or whatever. I have a pretty good idea. I've done it enough. Okay. That's when I actually use the time my brain thinks in the calendar. Otherwise, I am doubling or tripling the time my brain thinks. Okay. So again, choose your containers, identify your priorities, and then start uncovering how long these tasks take. Give yourself space to figure it out. You won't most likely get it right the first time. I certainly don't. Okay. Give yourself that space. Overestimate the time. And then begin tracking that data. And you don't have to do it forever, okay? But track the data for a little while so you have something to work with, long enough to give you the information you need to create that accurate schedule. Now, again, I know it's super annoying, but once you have the information that you need, it's gold. Knowing how long these different tasks are that you do on a regular basis, it allows you to create an accurate schedule that is not cluttered. It allows you to create a schedule that you can actually do without pushing yourself and burning out and doing too many things and overcommitting to too many things. It's what allows you to know what actually fits within your containers. And then we start filling those containers, okay? So we fill your containers with those prioritized tasks, beginning with the things that are most important and most impactful. Okay, do your best to respect the limits of each container. When your brain wants to fight it, when your brain says, what? I should totally be able to get more done in this block. Notice it, okay? Because if the container is full, we've reached our capacity. Your brain's going to be mad about that. It's going to want to be able to do 7 more things. Notice it and practice honoring the size of the container. If you happen to finish before, great, we can add more in. But let's plan for the size of the container that we anticipate. And then I do recommend, if possible, at the end of the day, maybe with a shutdown routine, to review what worked. Okay? What worked? What didn't? Was your container overflowing? Did it have extra space? Go in with curiosity so we can learn how to create a schedule that honors your capacity and your containers without overflowing. So again, visualizing your time containers and prioritizing the tasks within these containers and honoring the size of that container is such a powerful strategy to managing your time effectively and decluttering your schedule of anything that's unnecessary or simply doesn't fit. Okay? Remember, the key is to be realistic about what you can fit in that container and to prioritize the tasks that matter the most, that have the biggest impact. By doing so, you can create that more balanced, manageable schedule that aligns with your goals while also reducing the overwhelm. Now, when we are filling our containers of time, one of the most overlooked parts in this process, one that I certainly miss most often, is accounting for transition time. Okay? Those transition periods between the activities. The truth is, if you are anything like me, you probably don't want to accept the fact that your brain needs this transition time. However, by acknowledging and including that transition time that your brain needs in your calendar, it is crucial for decluttering your schedule and creating one that is realistic and actually reflects what we can do each day without burning out. What do I mean by transition time? Transition time is that period that our brains need to mentally and physically switch from one task to another. Okay? As ADHD brains, we tend to have rather inflexible brains if left unchecked. Okay? When we think about our executive functions, it is our cognitive flexibility, or inflexibility is how I like to talk about my brain. My brain tends to be quite a bit less flexible. So that makes it more challenging for my brain to shift in and out of tasks, right? Because it's more rigid and it's harder to kind of move into these different states of being, these different projects. So allowing for this transition time for my rather unflexible brain to actually shift, it's essential. for helping my brain to prepare for the next activity. If we skip this transition time, it can really lead to, at least for myself, intense procrastination, a whole lot of frustration, overwhelm, stress. It can even lead into burnout if we leave it unchecked because we're just fighting against ourselves constantly, shooting ourselves that we should be able to just get things done and stop procrastinating. But the truth is, we shouldn't. What we need is a transition so that we can get into the work more easily. I know it's so annoying, but remember, we are humans. We are not robots. So we literally need this. It's not just a nice to have. We literally need it. We need time to shift gears. That's how the brain works. Okay. And when we can acknowledge this, when we can acknowledge the hard truth of being human, when we're factoring in our time management, it's everything. I'm telling you, it is not realistic to expect ourselves to move seamlessly from one thing to the next. Even if we literally write it in our time-blocked calendar, the brain doesn't care. If we don't allow time for that transition, it's not going to happen. Now, maybe it does once. Okay, maybe it does that once in a blue moon, and then your brain goes, oh, but I did it that one time, so I should be able to do it all the time. No, okay? The brain is built to need this transition. It is not a flip of a switch. We are not robots. When we can start including this transition time and we respect our natural rhythms and our needs and what our brain needs, it makes creating schedules so much more sustainable and realistic. All right. Just like transition time, the next component is one that your brain might want to fight, but it's also incredibly important. Okay. It's one of the most powerful guidelines to help us ensure that we don't overbook our schedules or overcommit to too much. Okay. And this is the 1 in, 1 out rule. Now, again, this comes from Dana K. White's decluttering process. Okay. She talks about this 1 in, 1 out rule, and it's just as it sounds. Once you've kind of gotten to your clutter threshold, and what that means is you have the amount of stuff that actually feels good and it fits within the containers in your home. That's your clutter threshold, okay? Once you've reached that, then it's time to implement the 1 in, 1 out rule. If you buy a new shirt, one shirt that you already have goes out. If you buy a new set of plates, your current set of plates goes out. 1 in, 1 out. And just like physical decluttering, we can do the same approach, the same 1 in, 1 out to our schedules when we have reached our threshold of what actually fits within our containers. Okay? When we're thinking about our commitments and projects and tasks, the 1 in, 1 out principle is all about making these trade-offs and prioritizing what's most important. So for every new agreement, task, project, goal that you're adding to the schedule, once you've reached your capacity, another one is removed. Again, this helps to maintain that ideal balance that works for you in your current season for your brain. We can't keep adding more in because something has to give somewhere. So it helps prevent you from overloading your time containers. It's helping prevent overwhelming our brain with too much. It's all about recognizing our time, our containers, and what actually fits. It helps us to realize that our space, our time is limited. So if we want to add something new, we need to make room for it by removing something else. Okay? By respecting this need for the transition period, as well as thoughtful use of the 1 in, 1 out rule, I am telling you, you will be taking such powerful steps forward in creating and maintaining a decluttered schedule that allows you to prioritize what matters most, stay flexible, and ensure that your time containers remain manageable and aligned with your goals. And as always, with anything we do in I'm Busy Being Awesome, it's essential to practice self-compassion as you navigate this journey. Okay? This is an iterative process. We are learning. It's hard for everybody. This is easy for exactly no one. Okay? So give yourself some grace here. Recognize and appreciate all of the effort that you are putting in, even if everything doesn't go as planned. It probably won't. It certainly doesn't for me. Okay? Celebrate yourself for showing up. Instead of focusing on what you didn't accomplish and where you're so far behind, reframe that. Focus on what you did do. Focus on the gains. rather than the gap. Focus on everything you've done and how far you've come rather than the gap of what's left to do. You're showing up. You're trying. You're learning. You're adjusting. You're doing it. You're busy being awesome. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for us this week. And if you are ready to declutter your calendar and learn how to create a schedule that actually works for you and your brain, I would love it to help you do it. We can work together in my small group coaching program, We're Busy Being Awesome, or in one-on-one coaching. And you can learn about both options through the links in the show notes. Also, if your busy ADHD bestie would love to learn how to declutter their calendar, would you be a rock star and share this episode with them? You can text them the episode or snap a screenshot and share it in your Instagram stories, whatever you do. Please know that you are helping get these tools to even more people who need them. And I so appreciate you. Until next time, keep being awesome. I'll talk with you soon.